But what about the collapse of the FTX empire? We'll talk about elections next week. Hello, folks. It is election day in the U.S., and that's what's going to be my main focus today up until about 11:05 Eastern. Anyway, that's the point when Sam Bankman-Fried announced that his company FTX would enter a transaction with Binance, which Binance CEO Changpeng Zhao later clarified was a letter of intent for Binance to acquire FTX. Well, today has been a day. I had a whole election thing planned, but we're not going to know what's happening for a while anyway. So instead, I'm going to refer you to the links below to catch up on today's news. So why it matters, FTX was a huge player according to CoinGecko. As of this morning, FTX was the fourth largest exchange by volume. Sam Bankman-Fried was a huge donor during the midterm elections and was a leading voice on some legislation. He might still be, but his company going from being fined to signing a letter of intent with Binance over the course of 2 days might have some long-term ramifications. We'll have more on this in the coming days, but for now, catch up on last week, the last week of chaos here. So breaking it down is pretty much all they're doing. The whole thing started last week when their colleague over here, Ian Allison, reported that Alameda Research, a trading firm founded by Bankman-Fried and tied to FTX, held a remarkable number of FTT tokens on its balance sheet. FTT is the token issued by FTX. And here's what happened next. Binance to sell the rest of the FTX holdings as Alameda CEO defends firm's financial condition. We've covered a lot of this here on this channel, so I'm going to scroll through it. So they say we're going to need some time to figure out the implications. Bankman-Fried personally was a major donor this past election cycle. A political action committee backed by Bankman-Fried is even rumored to be the next main super PAC to receive President Joe Biden's blessing in the next election cycle. There's also regulatory implications. FTX US Derivatives, formerly Ledger, has a number of CFTC licenses. So what I wanted to point out here, and look, I'm going to get political, but Sam Bankman-Fried was backing the Liberal Party in a majority of posts that he was putting out. And so you want to take a look at that and just consider what kind of legislation he would be wanting to put into place and if that is actually in the best interest for cryptocurrency. So you want to look at who he's backing and so on, right? Especially because we have these midterms that have been coming on. And we're going to be talking about that too. So let's go ahead and get into politics for today, and we'll get it going. This is going to be fun, right? So U.S. midterm elections to set the tone for Bitcoin miners in the future. Obviously on this channel, we cover cryptocurrency mining, and this is a very hot topic politically because it does involve the environment, right? And the fact of the matter is that midterm elections in the United States, where we have basically 40% of the hash power for Bitcoin mining, will directly impact cryptocurrency, whether you like it or not. Whether you want to talk about it or not, it's happening. So, if you ignore politics, then you won't have a say in Bitcoin mining, in my humble opinion. You have to pay attention to what's happening here. The midterm elections are key to determining the industry's future, which is increasingly under attack by environmental advocates. Bitcoin miners across the U.S. are looking to Tuesday's midterm elections for a signal on the future of environmental policy, which may impact their expansions and operations. Since President Joe Biden took office almost 2 years ago, Bitcoin mining has garnered attention in the U.S. political landscape as miners moved their operations en masse from China and new investments were made domestically. The midterms are crucial for policy because they could set the tone for how the industry is perceived at both the state and federal level as they weigh approaches to the industry, said Kyle Schneps, Director of Public Policy at digital asset mining and staking infrastructure firm Foundry, which is owned by CoinDesk's parent company, Digital Currency Group. As more miners expanded in the U.S., Democratic lawmakers led by Senator Elizabeth Warren have questioned the industry's large energy usage and impact on electricity grids throughout the country. Bitcoin mining consumes great amounts of electricity to secure the blockchain's network as specialized computers try to guess the answer to an equation. Not really how this works. I hate it when they say that, but for, Basics, sure, okay. Which environmentalists think is working against U.S. and global climate goals. However, the Republicans have been a supporter of Bitcoin mining and crypto in general. Although the mining industry has tried to promote a bipartisan approach to lobbying, support has mostly come from right-wing or center politicians, said Ethan Vera. And this is, look, if you're on the left and you think that, and you support Bitcoin mining, you need to pay attention to like what is actually happening. I hate to say it like over and over again because I feel like a broken record, but it is clear that as far as policy is concerned, if you want the best policy that is in the interest of Bitcoin mining, you will lean to the right or center. Now, personally, I'm not right wing. I'm more libertarian. But it's important to understand like what your options are when you are voting. And we've talked about this running up to these midterms quite a lot, but here's why. Republicans are less likely to push the more stringent direction proposed in White House paper released early September, Vera said. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy called for standards to reduce the industry's impact on the environment in a September report. Crypto broadly, and the mining in particular, has managed to stay largely bipartisan at the federal level, said Foundry Sneps. The biggest difference is not along party lines, but adoption. And I disagree because, like, we're going to talk about this here in just a second, too. But in New York, it is clearly... Okay, here's how I put it. He could be correct that at the federal level, it's not a partisan issue. I would disagree based on, of course, the policies that the Biden administration has been proposing for cryptocurrency. Personally, I think that they're by and large negative, right? As far as like the proposals that were put into place. But let's say that federally it's bipartisan, like it's a bipartisan issue. At the local level, it's very clear that the Democrats are, like in New York, for example, Kathy Hochul, are vehemently against cryptocurrency mining and Bitcoin mining in particular. But John Olson, New York policy lead at industry lobbying group Blockchain Association, thinks that the issue has too often developed into hyperpartisanship we've all experienced in other areas of political life. And like I said, like it's a pretty easy distinction. You look at New York and you look at what's going on between the parties and Bitcoin mining in general, and it is clear that it is a hyperpartisanship issue, where it is to the point to where Kathy Hochul won't even sit down with someone and have a reasonable conversation with them about Bitcoin mining policy, right? Amid this debate, the key states investors will be watching in the upcoming midterm elections are New York and Texas. In July, New York State passed legislation sponsored by Democrat Anna Keyes that prohibits the development of new mining facilities using carbon-based energy for 2 years as authorities study its impact on the environment, on local communities, and the environment. And to be clear, this is more than likely at this point going through. So if you are mining, you know, we're planning to spin up a mining farm or you currently have one in New York, well, you know, things are not looking good. The legislation, which has not yet been signed into law, has nevertheless pushed the companies and jobs out of the state, Sneps said. Upcoming elections could show a public rebuke of this type of anti-jobs policy during a time of economic hardship, Sneps said. The economic impact of the moratorium was a sticking point for Democrats Clyde Vannell and Jeremy Cooney, who opposed the bill. Meanwhile, in Texas, arguably the world's latest Bitcoin mining hub with 1.5 gigawatts of mining projects, politicians are working with industry group Texas Blockchain Council to introduce legislation to, quote, support the continued development of the Bitcoin mining industry in Texas, end quote, said Steve Kinnard, the council's director at Bitcoin Mining Analytics. The TBC has identified 8 candidates from both parties who have demonstrated support for the blockchain, Bitcoin and digital asset industry through in-depth technical knowledge of the space or willingness to engage on key policy issues, Kinnard said. The list includes Governor Greg Abbott. Of course, Greg Abbott did win, and that was retweeted by the Texas Blockchain Council, and they said congratulated him. Why are they worried about that? Because specifically, if cryptocurrency is your issue and you're worried about how it will be approached at the state level, then Greg Abbott was a better choice than Beto, because Beto has been clearly more on the environmental side of things. It is hyper politicized right now because environmentalism is hyper politicized to the point to where it is very close to the, as far as if you wanted to compare, you know, environmentalism to anything else, it is extreme. It is very clear that it is hyper partisanship. It is very clear that it is extremely close to issues like the trans issue, like abortion and so on. Maybe not as much as abortion, sure, I'll give you that, but it is hyper politicized. And so if you are in a position where you want to do what's best for cryptocurrency, you need to be paying attention to the politics and to the politicians that are, you know, advocating for you as somebody that participates within crypto. It seems ridiculous to me that you would vote for somebody that is basically vehemently opposed to what you believe in. The U.S. votes, so let's go ahead and check out the midterm elections crypto live blog and see. I think they had a couple big takeaways here that I wanted to go over. So it says, while a number of results have rolled in, it still seems to be far too early to tell whether Democrats retain control of both houses of Congress or if Republicans will take control of one or both bodies. As of midnight Eastern time, the New York Times rated the Senate a toss-up and the House leaning Republican. The markets focused on the FTX Alameda collapse, with few in the crypto industry focusing on midterms Tuesday. The market meltdown appears to have halted, at least for the moment, the price of major cryptocurrencies. It doesn't look to. It looks like we're about to drop below 17K on Bitcoin, right? Yeah, we just did. Boom, right there, 16,000. The price of major cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, Ether, BNB, and XRP, remain relatively steady over the past hour, in the sharp contrast to downturns earlier in the day, according to CoinGecko. I think they're off as far as that goes. What we wanted to look at, though, is not so much this. So I wanted to point out this one. So the confounding factors might be the market itself. Bankman-Fried and FTX's collapse will likely have a negative impact on how crypto is perceived in Washington. Indeed, two longtime supporters of crypto, Republican Representative Patrick McHenry and Senator Cynthia Lummis, both argued that the collapse is a sign that the industry needs clearer regulation. And this is also where we're going to get into like the weeds here, is like we on this channel, we always point out that there's a bit of fear mongering when it comes to regulation. It's like these bad things happen, therefore, you know, let the government regulate it. And that can be taken too far, right? There can be a slippery slope for regulation as far as all of this is concerned. But once again, we're in some sort of hybrid model. I think like the Texas state constitution being modified to basically protect the citizens' right to own and basically have some sort of digital currency, whatever digital currency they want, including stable coins, is important. I think a stable coin, for example, that would be based on like BRICS would be extremely interesting from a U.S. citizen perspective in the near future. And I think that putting a hindrance on the U.S.'s population to obtain that would be going in the incorrect direction. So I think protecting those rights is important. And it's important to also pay attention to people that are flip-flopping on the issue and basically pushing for more regulation when bad things happen. And so obviously Representative Patrick McHenry and Senator Cynthia Lummis are some to pay attention to here. So we also have the son of Reverend Jesse Jackson. Jonathan Jackson is one of the few congressional candidates in this election to have openly advocated for cryptocurrency during his campaign. The Democrat was easily winning in his Chicago district with 79% of the vote. So the crypto industry's political action committees can chalk up a victory here, having spent considerably to support his primary. In fact, they spent so much that Jackson, there we go, had to issue a statement that said the crypto dollars were technically independent expenditures under campaign finance rules and therefore out of his hands. Now, in New York, Governor Kathy Hochul won re-election Tuesday night. This is bad for crypto. Hochul has sat on a bill to prohibit new carbon-based crypto mining facilities for 2 years, which the state legislature passed earlier this year. She told reporters on numerous occasions that she was still reviewing the bill, but she hasn't expressed many other views on crypto. Republican Mark Wayne Mullen, also a recipient of crypto, was projected to win a full term in Senate from Oklahoma with 62% of the vote. He won a primary to fill the seat earlier this year, so hopefully that goes through and is successful. So far as like proponents of crypto, it does look like it's leaning towards pro-cryptocurrency as far as the people that are getting elected, right? Democratic Representative Josh Gothamir and Richie Torres, members of Congressional Blockchain Caucus, were holding onto their seats with about 58% more than 82% of the votes, respectively. Several other House candidates supported by the cryptocurrency industry also headed towards winner's circle Tuesday night, including Glenn Ivey, a Democrat who crushed his opponent in Maryland, and Republican Mark Alford, who sailed to a commanding victory in Missouri. And Missouri's Attorney General Eric Schmidt will be the next senator there, having been backed by one of the main industry's PACs. The industry may recall New York Democratic incumbent Representative Nydia Velasquez, or I think I said that right, who held a hearing on blockchain technology and small business in 2020, which didn't seem to produce any particular congressional action. She's winning re-election, so she'll be expected to return to the House Financial Services Committee. Republican J.D. Vance has an 8-point lead over his Democratic competitor, Tim Ryan, in the battle for retired Ohio Senator Rob Portman's open seat. The New York Times is reporting Vance is very likely to win with 82% of the votes in. Both Vance and Ryan have been vocal about their support for the cryptocurrency industry. The outgoing Portman was a key author of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which contained a crypto tax provision the industry lobbied unsuccessfully to defeat. Representative Warren Davidson, a leading pro-crypto Republican, won re-election to the House of Representatives. Davidson was the author of Token Taxonomy Act, an effort to create some legislative clarity on or around how cryptocurrencies would be regulated in the U.S. So another good win there. The crypto markets have remained relatively steady over the past hour. No, they aren't. They're taking a dump. So let's scroll down from here. I think that's... Yeah, so New York Times is predicting that former Republican Congressman Ted Budd will win the Senate seat in North Carolina, beating his Democratic competitor Sherry Beasley. 84% of the votes currently in, and Budd holds a 3-point lead. Budd was on the Congressional Blockchain Caucus and led a charge on several crypto-friendly policy initiatives. Overall, even if you have some Democratic, really... Here's what it looks like. It looks like primarily across the board, we're seeing pro-cryptocurrency advocates being elected. Outside of some of the outliers like in New York State where you got Kathy Hochul, and that's just looking like a terrible state to be in for cryptocurrency. But if you look outside of that, it looks like, well, even if it's a Democrat or a Republican, they appear to have some sort of crypto-friendly policy background. And that's going to really bode well, of course, for cryptocurrency later on, right? Obviously, what's going on now is a complete meltdown due to FTX and so on. And we'll have to see how that reacts. My assumption would be that you do end up with a huge push for a bunch of regulations surrounding it. And like I said, we'll be in some sort of weird hybrid model when it comes to that. And I'm not sure how that's going to all play out. But I think at the end of the day, you do end up in a position where we push for more and more cryptocurrency adoption. I think that there will be a ton of regulation that surrounds it. I think it'll be found out ultimately that it's nearly impossible to regulate. There are a lot of big talkers out there, the UN trying to say that, third world countries shouldn't have access to stable coins. Well, the reason they don't want them to have access is clearly because, well, they're showing their hand. They want to be able to control the spin up and the tear down of small third world countries economically so that they can financially benefit. And the more and more adoption that grows within cryptocurrency and basically digital adoption period across the board. By that, I mean like access to a cell phone for, essentially extremely poor people and countries, access to the internet, which is coming for extremely poor countries and people with Starlink, access to technology and eventually to cryptocurrency because of the technology could bring a lot more people out of poverty than anything else that has ever existed before. And it'll get extremely interesting. This is part of the reason why I've been so obsessed with, some of the writings from like Karl Marx with like Das Kapital and so on, some of the things that I've talked about over on my Twitch channel, because we are getting to the point to where we are hitting, there's this idea that you hit a point where all like technology, the new technology, it used to be innovative and cost a lot of money, and basically why you need capitalism, ends up being accessible to everybody else down in the lower class. And that's really when you bring the lower class up, is by doing that. And I think that we are seeing that to a certain extent. And so from that perspective, that's exciting. I think the problem is that you have a whole bunch of people that still want it to be in another form, which is essentially, an extremely rich, like top class and then the lower class. And to be fair, it could transfer into that depending on how the technology is utilized, right? If you end up in a position where the technology is utilized to control the lower class, then you end up in a position where nothing really changes. And so how all this plays out, like I said on Twitter, like I feel extremely blessed to be alive and watch this play out, because at the end of the day, like we're living through a generational shift. I mean, more than really a generational shift. Like, this is akin to the agricultural transformation or the industrial transformation. And I think like being able to live through a time like that is fascinating. And because it's digital, it's moving extremely fast. So we get to watch it happen, kind of all unfold in front of our eyes. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. You can check out the full episode here or more crypto content down here. Also, I'd like you to check out my locals page at sonofatech.locals.com, where you can become a member for free or choose to be a $5 a month supporter that unlocks additional content.